Welcome to podcast number 72 for Thanks for Your Service. Our focus is on historical topics relating to the Australian military. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter and YouTube. Just search for Thanks for Your Service. Our website is www.thanksforyourservice.net, and you can also email us at info@thanksforyourservice.net. One of the special things about doing these podcasts is coming across what I call hidden treasures of Australian military history located in our own backyard. Who knew, for example, of a World War II secret maintenance base for flying boats in rural Victoria, which we covered in podcast number 5, or the secret Special Forces camp in suburban Melbourne at Park Orchards that we covered in podcast 57. Last summer, I took the boys to Werribee in Melbourne, where an original World War II hangar houses the only remaining B24 Liberator in the Southern Hemisphere and is only one of 8 still existent in the world. We join Paul Rorke as he takes us on a tour of the Liberator and the restoration project. So, Paul, we're down at a beautiful Melbourne sunny day in Werribee, just south of Melbourne, at the B24 Liberator Memorial Museum. What is a B24 Liberator?
B24 Liberator is the only 4-engine heavy bomber that Australia had during the Second World War against the Japanese in the Southwest Pacific.
But not an Australian aircraft, an American aircraft?
It's an American aircraft supplied to us under Lend-Lease.
Okay, and who flew them in Australia?
Our aircrew.
So there were squadrons based not here at Werribee, or where were they based?
The squadrons, there was 12 units in all. There were 7 squadrons. There was the 7 squadrons, 2 special duties flights, the training unit at Tocumwal. The Liberators were mainly, all our training of our aircrew was done at Tocumwal in early 44. When we received our Liberators. The other squadrons were spread throughout the Northern Territory, Queensland and Western Australia in the north. They were also supported by the American 380th, 5th Air Force 380th Bomb Group and 90th Bomb Group that helped train our aircrew that were coming back from Europe, flying Lancasters and the like, and converting onto Liberators and in operational training. And most of those crew then transitioned down to Tocumwal to train our own aircrew.
And was Tocumwal the main training base, or the main base for the B-24s for the Aussies?
Yes.
Did we get them in 44? Is that when we started to get them through that Lend-Lease program?
We started to get them in 44. We were given 13 tired early model B24s that initially started the training at Tocumwal. And as we were re-equipped with newer models off the production lines coming across from America, they were put into training at Tocumwal. I think they ended up with about 58 Liberators at Tocumwal. In total, we had around 300. With the initial 13 plus the 287 that were supplied of the newer models.
300 in all. What was the role of the B-24 flown by the Australians?
They were used to attack the Japanese shipping, to disrupt the Japanese supply lines. Japanese targets in New Guinea, the Dutch East Indies, which is now Indonesia. Borneo, the big one that comes to mind is the oil refineries at Balikpapan were attacked by Australian Liberators and supported by American Liberators as well. And we were relegated to the Southwest Pacific by General MacArthur when he was trying to take all the glory, trying to get all the way back to the Philippines.
Indeed, yeah. Now, we're actually in Werribee. We're actually inside the hangar and the site of the B24 Liberator Memorial, and we've got one under restoration in front of us. So
we have the only Australian B24 Liberator in the Southern Hemisphere.
So can you tell us about this and maybe take us for a walk? We're actually We're actually inside a World War II hangar as well, aren't we?
Yes.
So what was the hangar used for? Was this a former Werribee Air Base?
This was the former Werribee satellite airfield to Point Cook and Laverton. This was used as a training airfield. There was also, until 10 Group under Group Captain Sherger moved north, there was a malaria hospital here, and it was an aircraft recovery and salvage unit as well. So once they moved north, it became just another training field and still remained as an aircraft recovery and salvage unit.
When did they stop using Werribee as an active airfield?
47, 48.
Okay. Right.
And the land and the buildings were handed back to then Melbourne Metropolitan Border Works.
So what's the history of this aircraft? Why did it end up here?
Well, initially, the reason it ended up here is because Melbourne Water were generous in allowing the hangar to be used to restore the aircraft in the early days. The aircraft fuselage itself was sold off for scrap in 1948 at East Sale. And it was bought by a chap by the name of George Toy. He had the aircraft fuselage moved to his property in Maui, and it was in the main street of Maui with all the trees of Maui growing up around it.
Yep.
If I go back a little bit of the history, in the mid-80s, two of the veterans themselves, Eric Clark and Bob Butler. Eric was a wireless air gunner, and Bob Butler was the aircraft captain. They were agitating at their reunions that they should be trying to find a Liberator to restore as a memorial to the 20,000 Australians that operated.
Goodness, that many Australians went through as crew.
Well, and ground crew. And support staff.
Goodness, yeah.
In 1988, they got enough people interested have a meeting or a conference at RAF Wagga in New South Wales. And anybody they could get involved from the War Memorial, government, the RAF Museum, to try and form a committee to raise funds to buy a Liberator from somewhere overseas, because they weren't going to find one in Australia, so they thought.
Yep.
All of ours had been put into the smelters and turned into aluminium pots and pans. So it came as quite a shock to find out in 1988 there was one 230 miles down the road. So they hightailed it down there and spoke to Mr. Toy, and sure enough, it was a Liberator. They were a bit dubious, but it was the Lib. They took an undertaking with George that if they could locate a wing, they would come back and speak to him and take delivery of the fuselage as a basis for a restoration. Not a lot happened more until 1990. And one of our members' sons was in the Ramu Valley outside Nadzab in New Guinea, northwest of Lae. They were building a school up there for the local people. He went for a helicopter ride on his weekends off out over the old airfields out in the Ramu Valley and came across an American B24 that had been attacked by Japanese fighters and force landed on the Australian emergency fighter strip in the Ramu Valley. He stood on the wing, had a photo taken from the chopper by the pilot, and sent the photo home, and his father said, "You found a Lib."
Wow, yeah.
So from there, the ball got rolling with the help of the Air Force and other sponsors. In 1991, they organised an exercise to go up to New Guinea to survey the aircraft to see whether it was worth recovering the wing or whether it was a total loss. They deemed that it was recoverable, and they went back in early 1992 and recovered the wing and the tail, horizontal tail plane. The fins were removed already, but they recovered the parts we needed, and they were transported on a coastal freighter from Lae down to Brisbane and then transshipped down to Melbourne. The wing arrived here at the hangar in November of 1992. They then went back down to see George because they had located a wing. George changed the agreement just a little, And it took another 3 years until November 95, almost 3 years to the day, to get the wing and the fuselage at the hangar at the same time.
Wow, okay. So the obviously the aircraft's in front of us. What's the status of the restoration now?
The aircraft's probably about 75 to 80% complete at the moment. There's a lot of internal work going on with electrics and hydraulics and oxygen systems. Externally, we can't do much more as far as the skin of the aircraft goes, because we have to remove the aircraft out of here, which will happen when we take possession of the larger hangar that's on the airfield, Hangar 1, which is being relocated by the end of 2027, 47 metres out into the paddock.
Right, okay.
And then the Liberator will then go out there. We have to take the outer wing panels off, turn the aircraft through about 30 degrees and roll it out into the other hangar, and then we can complete it externally to make it look like a Liberator.
And is the aim of the restoration to make it flying again? Okay, so
It's been dedicated to the Australian public,
yeah,
as part of the Australian collection back in 2000.
Let's take a look at the aircraft, if we could, to take us through it. So,
well, the aircraft has 4 turrets. It has the nose turret, which we're standing in front of now.
Yep.
Behind the nose turret is the bomb aimer and navigator.
Mm-hmm.
Then the pilots in the cockpit above the lower floor, and then the upper turret, and there's a ball turret down behind the bomb bay.
Yes.
Which goes out through the bottom of the aircraft, and then the rear turret up the back, and there are also 2 waste gunners, the left and right waste gunner.
Right, and the pilots, the 2 pilots for this aircraft,
2
is that correct?
2 pilots for this aircraft, captain and co-pilot.
Mm-hmm.
The pilot looks after all the flight instruments, and the co-pilot looks after all the engine maintenance and instruments. They do have a flight engineer as well. His main job is to transfer fuel. If there's any damage to fuel tanks, he can transfer fuel from one tank to another.
And in terms of the turrets, we're standing in front of the forward turret now. What sort of armament did it have on it?
50 calibre Browning machine guns.
And was that the same for the upper turrets? All turrets were all 50 cal?
50 calibre.
Plus the waste gunners?
Yep.
Okay. What sort of crew, a typical crew on this particular aircraft?
On this particular aircraft, normal crew would be 11. This particular aircraft is an MR model, which came off the production line, one of the last models off the production line at San Diego, from Consolidated themselves. It came out with dedicated radar. The radar operator sat above the rear bomb bay on the radar deck. As I say, normal crew was 11, but if the radio operator wasn't trained to use the radar, they would carry a dedicated radar operator as well. So they'd end up with a crew of 12. Most American aircraft only carried a crew of 10.
Mm-hmm. And all the aircraft were made in America and nothing under licence in Australia?
No.
All right.
No.
Okay.
So there was 19,500 Liberators built. There are only 13 airframes left in the world, and there are only 8 substantive airframes as the one you see in front of you.
Goodness. All right. So if we go around the front turret, we've got you said the bomb aimer and the navigator was under the
in the front here,
underneath the forward turret,
and the Norden bomb sight, which is just there, would be sitting just on that flat plate, armour plate there in front of us.
Right. Okay. Now we're going down the port side of the aircraft.
Side of the aircraft towards the bomb bay.
Yep.
Right, come on in.
All right. All right. So what's your head? So we're now underneath in the actual bomb bay, Paul. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. In the forward bomb bay.
Okay. So it had two bomb bays.
The B24 had 2 bomb bays.
Right.
The B17 only had 1, and we would be standing in it. This aircraft could fly higher, faster, and carry more bomb load than the B-17.
What sort of range in terms of distance and also height for this particular aircraft?
29 to 30,000 feet.
Okay, yeah, and they'd be on oxygen,
height,
obviously.
On oxygen, over 12,000 feet.
Yeah.
and it had a top speed of just under 300 mile an hour.
Mm-hmm.
Normal cruise was about 180, 210.
Mm-hmm.
But they had a range of 3,000 miles.
Wow, okay. Now, we're inside the bomb bay. For a World War II aircraft, it looks in very good condition. So are you able to give us an idea of the work that's gone into the restoration? Like when you first got the airframe to the point, where is it today? So I'm looking at bomb racks, and they're almost in pristine condition.
Yes. The whole aircraft was retrieved, the fuselage was retrieved from George. Every panel was removed, treated where it needed to be, and replaced on the fuselage. The fuselage, when it arrived, the aircraft was in two halves. It had to be reassembled, and then the wing had to be placed into the fuselage.
Wow. We've stepped up from the bomb bay
up into the flight deck.
Okay. All right. So what are we looking at here now?
Looking forward there, you're looking at the control pedestal for the engines and the flight controls. The trim controls are all there in the centre between the two pilots. The pilot's on the left, co-pilot on the right.
Yep.
If the upper turret was in here, we would be somewhat cramped because it would be hanging down above us here,
right,
into the aircraft to about 4 feet into the aircraft.
Okay.
So there's not a lot of room once that turret's in. You have the radio operator here on the right. The navigator has a table here on the left.
Mm-hmm.
There is normally a drift sight which goes in that big hole there on the side of the aircraft.
Yeah.
But, the navigator can come up and have a look through that and find out whether the aircraft's drifting with wind but forcing it across either left or right. And he can tell from there. Then he'll crawl back down around the nose wheel up to the front, back up to the front, to keep the bomb aimer company.
Right. So just in this area here, obviously you have the pilot, co-pilot, the radio operator, the navigator. So there's four plus the upper turret gunner, and then
flight engineer is fuel transfer panel just here on the left.
Right. So you also have the flight engineer in this area as well. So goodness, I mean, it's probably about 3 metres by 1.5, 2 metres. So you've effectively got 2, 4, 5, 6 people, 6 crew just in this particular area alone. And then underneath us is the navigator and the bomb aimer and the forward gunner as well.
Yeah. And the navigator would be down, in this aircraft. The navigator would be down the front there as well. He doesn't spend his time up
All
there.
right. Okay. And how did those folks access their area through here, or
they would crawl down around under the flight deck on the wooden crawl space up to the front of the aircraft.
Okay.
And just down here on the left is the aperture for the radar. The radar would be hydraulically lowered out of the aircraft here.
Mm-hmm. Goodness. All right. What's next? Do we go?
Go aft. Go aft.
Go
yes.
aft. So, Paul, in terms of the restoration, you said you're about 70-75% there, do you think? Is that what you said before?
75 to 80% at the moment. Well, as I said, we'll be able to, once we've moved the aircraft into Hangar 1, we'll be able to complete the aircraft externally.
Right. Is it because it's a bigger hangar, or what?
Yes.
What's the main reason?
Yes,
is that for that?
Much bigger hangar.
Right.
It's 1.5 times the size of this current hangar.
Goodness. Now I'm just stepping back down into the forward bomb bay. So, Paul, we've stepped out of the forward bomb bay. We're on the starboard side of the aircraft, and we're going to move
towards the rear.
Towards the rear.
And as we're moving towards the rear, below the roundel there, we can see where the ball turret comes down out of the aircraft.
Okay. All right.
And the guns lay in the two slots either side when it's fully retracted into the aircraft.
Okay.
Unlike a B-17, the B24 ball turret was fully retractable into the aircraft.
Wow. Okay. And the aircraft is a silver. Is this the original?
Yes. No, it's not painted.
Not painted or anything like that. And we're moving on the starboard side, rearwards again, aft. We've got one of the waist gunners, which is again is a 50 cal machine gun.
Yes.
And all right, what are we going to do now?
We're allowed to get up here.
Yeah, we're moving up through another access point into
This is the rear crew hatch.
the rear crew hatch. Okay. Okay, so we've come up through the rear crew access hatch, Paul. So what are we looking at?
So
my
we're now
goodness.
in the waste gun area with the left and right 50 calibre waste gun machines,
Yeah.
machine guns.
Yes.
Looking forward, we can
Shush.
see the wing,
Right. Yep.
and normally above the wing there, all the heavy radio equipment would sit above the wing.
Mm-hmm.
And forward, you can see two hatches, which are there would be cupolas which hold life rafts.
Right.
Would be in there for water ditching.
Mm-hmm.
Down there, the flight engineers area, there's a red handle. They can pull that, and that ejects the life rafts, and they inflate when they inject. If they have to ditch
Yep.
in water. Just behind the wing here is the radar operators area
Mm-hmm.
above the rear bomb bay. And coming back on the left and the right, you see the ammunition feeds for the left and right waste guns.
Yes. Yeah. And in terms of crew access between the area behind the wing and for the wing, was through the bomb bay.
Was through the centre of the bomb racks
Okay.
on the catwalk. You
Mhm.
couldn't stand on the bomb bay doors because they're not that strong. You could end up doing a 2,000-mile fall,
Yeah.
or 2,000 feet fall, rather.
Yeah. Okay. So we're going to look.
Behind us, up the back,
We don't
we'd be
know.
looking at the rear turret.
All right. So okay.
And the ammunition feeds for the rear turret are here, just on the left hand, on
All
the
right.
starboard side.
Just right next to the waste gunner as well. So that's it. So the rear turret, the waste gunners.
What's in there?
And ball, I should mention, this large mount just here is behind the radar deck, is the area that the ball turret is mounted to.
Yeah. Okay. Because it's retractable, of course.
Yep.
All right.
And goes down out through the bottom of the aircraft. And if we look out of the port window, we can see the ball turret.
With this particular aircraft, what was its service history?
Our B24 served at Tokamo, and in 1946, early 47, it was sent down to East Sale. The reason it was sent down there is because it carried radar, and it was going to do patrols down into Antarctica.
Okay. So it was essentially a training aircraft. This particular aircraft didn't see operational services.
It was essentially a training aircraft. It didn't see active service.
Mm-hmm. All right. So we're coming back out of the rear access hatch. And also right at the rear of the aircraft is where the tail gunner. Again, two 50 cal machine
250
guns.
calibers, yeah.
Right. And where's the rear gun located? Have you got it here, or that's
the rear turret is over on our left over here.
Yep.
It's under restoration at the moment.
Okay. So we're on the port side of the aircraft. We're just walking past the
ball turret.
The ball gunner. Let's have a look at the sort of size. So this bloke would sit in here for the duration. Well, maybe not the whole duration, but certainly when they get out.
Once they were into enemy territory or approaching enemy territory, the ball turret gunner would get into the turret.
Is it feasible from a restoration perspective to actually get the aircraft into an airworthy condition or not? No. Because just
money.
Okay, all right. So if you had the money, you could do it, but
the only drawback to that would probably take another 25 years to dismantle the aircraft and rebuild it with licensed mechanical engineers.
Okay. Yeah. Are there any flying B-24s?
There are only two currently. There's one which is what they call an LB-30, which is a cargo variant of the B-24 that's flown by the Commemorative Air Force in the US. And there is a J model with the Collins Foundation in America that flies. And I don't know whether they're still taking passengers because they lost their passenger carrying licence a few years ago, about 4 years ago now, after they crashed a B-17 at an air show.
Yeah. Now, in terms of this particular memorial, we're in Werribee. Whereabouts exactly in Werribee can people find here at the hangar?
We're on the corner of Farm Road and Princes Highway on the Geelong side of Werribee.
And when are you open?
We're open on Tuesday, Thursday and Sunday from 9:30 till 3:30.
And obviously, there's a substantial cost that goes to the restoration of such a project like this. Where can people donate?
They can donate through our website if they wish to, or they can come and visit us and pay their $10 entrance fee. We also run the 1830 engines for at an additional cost of $10 per person for a minimum of 15 people to run the engine. But our normal entrance fee, as I say, is only $10 donation, and we're totally unfunded by government or anybody else. And the initial money came from the veterans themselves. Because after the war, they were able to go to university and better their conditions. A lot of them ended up as doctors and lawyers and pastoralists, and that's where the bulk of the money came from to initially obtain the aircraft.
What about yourself? What's your interest in this?
I'm ex-Air Force. I served 22 years in the Air Force.
Yeah, and this has now just become a passion for you.
Yes, I first got involved with the aircraft back in 1996 after I'd retired from the Air Force, when not long after the fuselage had arrived here at Werribee.
Right.
I spent a couple of years here, only working on Sundays, but owing to circumstances at the time, I had to go back to work full time. And I didn't retire again until 2014.
Right. So you've seen this restoration grow from the 1990s to what we see today. What's the difference? I mean, I'm looking at an aircraft that looks like in very, very good condition. Take us back to when you first saw it.
If you'd seen it right at the start when it arrived out the front, the reaction would have been, how in the heck are we going to do anything with this? There are photos down in the museum area that show the condition of the aircraft when it arrived. That it's been a magnificent job done by the veterans and all the volunteers over the last 25, 30 years.
It has. I mean, even if I say that the aircraft looks like it's in immaculate condition, I certainly wouldn't be exaggerating. Paul, and obviously people can go to your website, and you have a Facebook
our
page.
Facebook page, yes.
If they want more information. I think one thing in terms of the podcast that I've done is that I'm always amazed at these little relics of Australian military history that you come across. Didn't know about this until I came across your website. Ballarat, we went up recently to visit the One Wags folks up there, the Air Force Association that took us through One Wags, and here we are today. But certainly I think the message for people listening to the podcast is that, you've really got to come and see for yourself, because it is such an impressive restoration projects that you guys have taken out over a long time. Thank you so much for your time today, and thanks for your service as well.
Thanks, David, and you're welcome.
The website for the B24 Liberator restoration is www.b24, that's numerals 24, australia.org.au. The restoration project also welcomes any donations, and you can find out more information on their website. That's the podcast for today. We're keen to hear your feedback by leaving a review on your podcast app. Your reviews helps new listeners find our podcast. And you can help support this podcast via Patreon or Buy Me a Coffee. The links are on our website and Facebook page, and your support helps us with the production of this podcast. Thanks for listening, and thanks for your service.